Welcome everyone. We have Simon Brooks in the house. He's a compliance expert and an ex-director of engineering for VMware and BlackBerry. He's now a fractional CTO for growth-focused B2B companies in regulated industries, and generally where security, compliance, and UX are extremely critical. And with that, Simon, the mic is yours.
Okay, let me just start by sharing. Okay, so good day, everyone. It's great to be here. Like all of you in this room, I spend my days in the trenches with leadership teams, helping them to navigate the complex intersection of technology, strategy, and growth. I've had the privilege of sitting on both sides of the table as an operator building the tech and as an advisor helping leaders untangle complex knots. And I've noticed a pattern. The most common reason promising, well funded companies in regulated spaces fail to scale isn't a lack of engineering talent or product vision. It's a failure to scale trust. That's what I want to talk about today. Scaling trust, which I believe is the real secret to accelerating growth in regulated industries. We've all seen the story played out. We engage with a promising growth stage company in fintech, health tech, or legal tech. They have product market fit and investor backing, but they're hitting a wall. It starts small. Security questionnaire for a big enterprise client takes 2 weeks to complete instead of 2 days. A key product feature gets pushed by a quarter because the mobile and web platforms have divergent compliance logic. The board starts asking why the tech roadmap feels disconnected from the revenue goals. And we, as their fractional CTOs, often get brought in to fix the tech debt or improve the process. But those are symptoms. The root cause is a fundamental misunderstanding of what compliance is for. We've taught our clients that certifications are nothing without trust. A SOC 2 report can get you through a procurement gate, but it can't stop an enterprise customer from churning when your platform is unreliable. Compliance is not just a shield, it's a signal. And when your certifications say one thing, but your customer experience, your uptime, and your product velocity say another, you have a trust gap. And that gap is where growth stalls. The shift required is to move from being a compliance first to being trust first. This is more than semantics. It's a different operating model. It requires a powerful reframe. Trust is a growth driver, while compliance is seen as a cost. This is the core of what I call the trust-driven scalability framework. It's built on four integrated pillars. First, a trust-first architecture. This isn't about choosing a specific stack. It's about making architectural choices where security and governance are non-negotiable parameters, just like performance or cost. It means every new feature inherits a baseline of trust by default, rather than accumulating risk. But second, AI-powered risk intelligence. Here, we move from reactive audits to predictive insights. Imagine a system that flags potential compliance drift in your CI/CD pipeline before it ever reaches production. That's turning trust into a real-time operational metric. Third, trust as a business KPI. This is about elevating the conversation in the boardroom. When a head of engineering can show a trust score improving alongside uptime and feature velocity, the board sees a mature, well-run organization. It changes the narrative from "are we at risk" to "how is our trustworthiness driving our valuation?" And finally, trust as a market differentiator. When your sales team can walk into a CISO's office and not just show a report, but demonstrate a live dashboard of your trust posture, you win deals that your competitors can't even get to the table for. Trust becomes your unfair advantage. And tying this all together is our third takeaway. To make trust evaluation continuous, it has to be automated, monitored, and embedded into the team's mindset. That's how these pillars come to life. So when these pillars are in place, the dynamic of the business changes. You move from a state of constant struggle to a self-reinforcing growth flywheel. The struggle state feels like running in mud. Every step is an effort. Teams spend more time in meetings justifying delays than they do building. The platform becomes a house of cards, where every new feature risks bringing something else down. The flywheel state feels different. There's momentum. Product, engineering, and GRC teams are aligned because they share the same metrics for success. The platform becomes an asset that enables speed rather than a liability that constrains it. And those board conversations shift from managing downside risk to capitalizing on upside opportunities. This is how you build a trust moat. It's more than just a buzzword. It's a structural barrier to competition. Anyone can copy a feature. It's incredibly difficult to copy an entire operating model built on a foundation of deep, verifiable trust. The result is accelerated, defensible growth and a stronger valuation. So to wrap up, I want to leave you with the 3 key takeaways we've discussed today. First, that all the compliance certifications in the world are nothing without genuine trust from your customers and investors. Second, that we must help our clients reframe the problem, to see trust not as a cost, but as a primary driver of growth. And third, that making trust continuous requires it to be automated, monitored, and woven into the very fabric of the team's culture. The core idea is a challenge to us as advisors. We have an opportunity to help our clients move beyond the friction of good enough compliance and architect businesses that are built to last because they're built on trust. Let's not just help them check the boxes. Let's help them build the moat. Thank you. I'd love to open this up for discussion and hear your thoughts.
So much, Simon. That truly was a lightning talk. You went by fast. uh, so opening the, well, it was great. Opening the door for like, does anyone have any questions? Okay. I I was struggling to understand a bit more about, and maybe this is curse of knowledge or I'm just ignorant here, but could you give an example from your personal experience around where I could put all of this in context? I was gonna ask you, another question, but I'd like to understand the issue here a bit more.
Yes, I mean examples can be very, very different based on those different industries. I mean, I've gone from a company which is creating loan products for multinational banks. And so their starting proposition is going after 5 or 6 different countries worth of certifications. So their perspective was, well, pick privacy. What's the hardest privacy standard we can go for? Like GDPR high level. So we're going to start by building an automated system that looks at all the controls necessary for GDPR high and work towards getting that. As you get that, you're 95% of the way through almost every other privacy standard that you might be looking at, and a number of the other compliance standards as well. And so each time you're adding onto a process, and that becomes a mindset through all of the developers. Everything you do, all of the tools are integrated in together to be able to provide automated reporting into that. And that's a company that was able to be helped a lot earlier on, working with some other fintech companies in LATAM where they are providing payment processing services to the unbanked and then working towards integrating with different banks. And what they found was integrating with one bank is easy. Multiple banks in one country is a little harder. And then as soon as you move to another country, they ended up having to create an entire new dev team and compliance team in each country until they could start automating this process better and reducing that scaling friction, because otherwise it's a linear scale with the team sizes scaling with the number of customers. That doesn't work for anyone. So those are very different processes in very different places, approaching different scales of enterprises. Some approaching the smaller banks, others approaching big multinationals. And what you have to do to get through those doors is very different. But being able to show that trust, compliance, security, privacy, governance are all built into the fabric of how you're building things is a lot better story to tell than going, look, we've got these tick box certifications. In many cases, whilst the standards are maybe hard to complete, the thing to remember is that any standard is the highest level that a committee could convince probably a governing body or a government to approve. So it's almost certainly nowhere near as high as anybody on that committee or on the buyer's side would have liked any of those standards to be. So they're not all a just reach there and stop. It's a make sure this is a process that is continuous. So that's how it applies there, and health tech gets somewhat different. I've been remarkably shocked the number of times I've gone into companies that have significant numbers of clients and found out all of those relatively early stage clients ignored the fact that they had no privacy, no HIPAA certifications, that even the electronic health records companies were willing to short-term overlook the lack of high trust and integrate, providing there was only limited data being shared. And so several companies in that space that I've gone through with the same thing, where they're not looking at the full details of the patient's records, but they are needing to communicate with the patient and with the doctors. Some which are just simple solutions helping practices raise the rates of turnout to appointments. Others which are literally about third-party services who are struggling to bill correctly for the services that have been referred to them. Those different sets of things, they get by in the early stage companies, but they can't grow. They hit that point where they're going from the early adopters to the large set, and it's crossing the chasm. Somebody else wrote a nice book for that. And trust is what helps you build the bridge. And I know I now use two analogies of trust as a moat and trust as a bridge, but yeah, trust is what can help you cross that chasm.
Okay. Randall has put a couple of questions in the chat, so I'll let you take those.
It's a significant shift in mindset for leaders in understanding how the company delivers value. Could not work on helping leaders make that change. So yeah, I mean, I'm always starting with the CEO. It's always starting with the CEO, and so it's very different with different CEOs as to the approach you're taking, whether they're coming from a product space, a marketing space, a sales space, who they are and what they've already done. But it's really, yeah, it really is a case of talking to that go-to-market strategy, which is what delivers their company vision. Do they have a vision? Are they actually driving towards that vision? And talking to them and getting in front of the right people to reframe this position. I think in the cases of when I've spoken to business development, marketing leads, or specific sort of fractional COOs and people creating go-to-market strategies, it's really quite simple to reframe this, to get them to believe that if they can sell this story, a true story of how trust is being built into everything that's being done, it will get them through so many doors, more doors than it would just showing the certifications they've got. And it even gets them through the doors whilst working on a certification. So that works. It doesn't necessarily work with everyone. I've certainly spoken to a number of people for whom compliance is now and always has been a cost. Somebody's come from a big enterprise, especially when it's a team that's come from a big enterprise and set their own company up. There can be a lot of pushback. Oh, compliance is always a cost. It should be pushed off to a GRC department. They should do all the work. We just have to minimize the amount of cost and the amount of effort the engineering team has to do to get it through that. And that if that mindset is embedded in the entire leadership team, it's very, very hard to change. We're not always in the best position to change because they're not receptive to the message well, certainly they're not receptive to the message that I'm passing on. But it, however, when they start losing out to companies that have been doing this, then they start getting, the more they get into trouble, the more they're willing to listen. And they will get into trouble. And yes, that's what, and so the second point, cost reduction is a much easier thing to measure than value created by trust. Yes. Yes, it is. But to pick another book, measure what matters. Cost reduction of compliance doesn't really tell you. I mean, you should be measuring the ROI on what you were spending. It's not about just reducing the cost. It's about improving the ROI on what you are spending. So if you can measure the ROI on what you were getting from meeting those compliance needs in the first place, you can then start thinking, okay, so if we invest more and make it more as part of our go-to-market strategy, how do we measure that? What different metrics can we measure in that? Are we getting more conversations that we weren't getting before? Are we signing up more logos? Are we accelerating the process? It's not the only thing driving those things, but it is a factor. You'll see the salespeople will be measuring the calls they've had and the number of no's they're getting. If that doesn't start changing when this becomes part of the conversation, then that's a factor saying that something's wrong. So it's going to be very different depending on whether you've got, say, the one I was talking about with dental practices is scaling by approach trying to reach lots and lots of small dental practices, maybe some small groups, but not the thousands of practices companies at this stage because they built their own systems. So they're scaling through large numbers of small customers, whereas other people are scaling through small numbers of large customers. And so the metrics are going to be different with every single client, but it's still the same thing. How do you measure any of your sales motions? This is just another part of it. You're just tracking it all the way from engineering. The same way you probably should be with so many of your other success metrics, such as building shiny new features, which salespeople are always lovely and wonderful about. As one of the best lessons I learned, this came whilst I was at BlackBerry, was actually having an SVP of engineering who was willing to say to the salespeople, unless you can tell me the ROI you're expecting on this new feature beforehand, and then back it up and show me the numbers afterwards, we're going to start paying less attention to the feature requests we're getting from you as a salesperson. And that's metric driven, and it should be applied to everything that you're doing. And it's how you it I don't it's very hard not to try and drive metrics in that way.
Thank you so much, Simon. This was great. Um, I think we have time for one last question, or we can wrap up. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining. This was great.